Inside Hotel Monterey, a lively party takes over the club lounge. There, the crowd dances and celebrates to the sound of loud music. Meanwhile, the DJ commands the room with contagious enthusiasm. Soon, a woman approaches a man and greets him discreetly. Next, she whispers that the package has already arrived in the reserved room. With the message delivered, a bundle of cash is discreetly left in her glass. At the same time, on the 22nd floor, a group of men waits in the VIP lounge. Suddenly, the corridor lights go out, and one of them asks what's going on. The boss then orders everyone to stay calm and sends someone to check the floor below. At that very moment, the elevator silently arrives on their floor. As soon as the doors open, a knife is thrown at high speed. Immediately, the blade hits one of the men square in the head. Upon seeing the body fall, his companion reacts in utter shock. Desperate, he screams that there's an intruder on the premises. The one responsible for the attack charges in and takes him down easily, mocking the Yakuza's lack of skill. Then, another thug points a gun and yells for him to die already. But with quick movements, the attacker uses the man's body as a shield. In one swift motion, he defeats the opponent while disarming him effortlessly. The leader wastes no time and orders one of his men to report the incident and call for reinforcements immediately. Meanwhile, the stranger realizes there are still many enemies left to defeat. With a confident smile, he promises to finish everything so they can return home. Then, a brief and intense clash begins in the narrow hallway. Soon after, the floor is covered with fallen bodies. Panting on the ground, the boss identifies him as the hired killer from Korea. The attacker, approaching silently, is revealed to be a member of the Balhei organization. The boss, Hashikoto Shinichi, asks how much the rival company is paying for the mission. Desperate, he offers 10 times more in exchange for his life. Hashikoto tries to provoke him, but quickly regrets it and begs to be heard. Without hesitation, the other man presses the knife lodged in the Yakuza with force. The boss's scream of pain echoes through the hallway under the pressure of the strike. Right after, the attacker explains with laughter that double contracts violate company policy. With a serious look, he adds that he would be hunted by terrible people if he broke the rules. With that, he declares it's time to finish the job without further delay. Then he turns toward a cabinet and praises the courage of whoever had the guts to hide in there all this time. As he opens the door, he says they need to wrap things up so they can return to Korea. Suddenly, he's completely stunned by what he sees inside. Shocked, he can't believe the scene before his eyes. Inside the cabinet lies the body of Nakaka Kuniyasu, the head of the Sakaum-gumi. While wondering who did it, a hooded figure attacks him from above. The strike is precise and the assassin can't react, quickly being defeated. All that remains are red stains on the floor after the devastating blow. Even so, the attacker steps over the body lying on the ground. The mysterious figure, with red eyes, stares down at him, victorious. Far from there, a woman walks down the hallway of the Balhei Art Museum organization. She calmly heads toward the elevator on the floor. Next, she enters the compartment and waits in silence. The doors close as she maintains a serious and firm expression. Amid a violent scene, several assassins engage in intense fights. Soon, the woman catches the knife that was thrown in her direction. As she approaches her subordinates, one of them asks if she's alright. Chae-Yurin Balhei simply tells them to be careful not to lose company property. After the warning, she turns around and heads toward a door in the back. With that, she enters a large, well-lit conference room. The place is already prepared for an emergency meeting of the Balhei Council. Yurin Balhei thanks everyone for attending despite their busy schedules. However, Counselor Han Manj questions the reason for the sudden summons. He also points out that the director isn't even present in the room. Kang Suin scolds him, smiling, reminding him he should have read the reports. She then comments that lately, people in their industry have been under attack. Han Manj, however, downplays the incidents, saying that deaths are part of the job. With a serious look, Suin asks what he would say if the victims were from their own organization. Surprised, the counselor asks what exactly she means by that. Chae-Yurin Balhei confirms that her colleague is right, revealing multiple losses among their staff. Furious, the man stands up and asks who would dare to confront Balhei. Even so, she clarifies that nothing has been confirmed yet and it might not be an organization at all. The vice director, Gu Daon, questions her about what exactly she means by that. Then, Yurin Balhei picks up a tablet to present the investigation data. The screen lights up the table, capturing the attention of everyone present. Next, she displays the photos and explains that some believe it might be a single individual. The leader concludes that the case is serious as there is someone skilled they still don't know. Kang Suin, in turn, finds the idea unlikely and wonders why they would attack her men. With a pensive expression, Gu Daon suggests it might be someone they already know. The woman reacts with surprise to his hypothesis. Gu Daon then begins to lay out his reasoning calmly. He goes on to recall the incident involving the monster that defeated assassins years ago. That man, known by the codename Zodiac, carried a dark reputation. Gu Daowon confirms that after the incident, he immediately retired. However, he warns that Zodiac's turbulent departure from Balhei makes him someone to keep an eye on. Han Manj disagrees, arguing that such suspicion without proof would shake the team's morale. In response, Kang Soo-in just scoffs at his statement with disdain. She then questions what Zodiac's past actions have to do with the current case. Irritated, the advisor tells the clever fox to shut up while the adults are talking. Immediately, she draws a gun and points it straight at his head. With a threatening smile, she asks if she should help him leave right now. Han Manj retorts that only after he's put a hole through her skull. Chaeyorin Balhei intervenes and orders them both to end the fight immediately. Calmly, she reminds them that they're in an official meeting. Reluctantly, they glare at each other angrily before finally backing down. Gu Daowon then breaks the silence and asks what the director said about the situation. The woman prepares to relay the decision she received from her superior. She informs them that he will leave internal affairs in the council's hands during his trip. With that, Daowon states that the priority is to gather more evidence, since everything is still circumstantial. Kang Soo-in, however, questions what they will do if Zodiac really is behind this. In response, several hooded figures silently approach her. The men stand before Chaeyorin Balhei as a sign of obedience. With a determined look, she adjusts her glasses without hesitation. Chaeyorin Balhei then declares that he will be dealt with the Balhei way. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to the front of a street cafe. On the ground, there's a man injured and visibly beaten. A henchman approaches, nervous, asking who the hell that bastard is. The fallen man then asks if he really means what he just said. The person who faced him was just a regular cafe worker. The narrative jumps back to a few minutes before the tense confrontation. Two men walk into the cafe, and one of them tells the other he told the clerk they were friends. Soon, the friend replies not to worry and that a coffee would be enough. Sitting down, the other yells for the intern to bring an iced Americano and a hot chocolate. Behind the counter, the clerk politely asks them to place their order at the register. Ignoring the request, the customer keeps chatting with his companion. Moments later, he returns with the order and calmly sets it on the table. As he walks away, the clerk is stopped as the man steps on his foot. The customer then asks what that is, and the attendant replies it's what was requested. Furious, he throws the drink on the floor, shouting that he never asked for hot chocolate. He then questions who in their right mind would drink something hot in that weather. Meanwhile, the other customers start whispering at the scene. The cafe clerk tries to explain that the customer clearly ordered that. Irritated, he grabs him by the collar and asks why the intern talks back so much. Then he shakes him forcefully, yelling at him to get the order right. Calmly, the clerk asks him to leave, threatening to call the police. The man gets even angrier and dares him to do it without hesitation. However, someone shows up, blocks his punch, and sweeps his legs. In one swift move, the attacker is slammed hard onto the cafe floor. Lying down, he wonders who the hell that bastard is as the other man says violence isn't allowed. Then the coffee is poured directly onto his face. With a smile, the owner Gu Sang-hyuk asks if that was the cold drink he wanted. As he steps forward, the man yells, asking if everyone there has lost their mind. Sang-hyuk easily dodges him with a towel, making him lose balance. As the customer falls, the owner advises him to work more on leg strength. His friend then gets irritated, asking if he knows who he's dealing with. Sang-hyuk immediately kicks the table in response to the threatening tone. The object flies and hits the second man directly in the body. With a furious look, he promises to get revenge for the humiliation. Sang-hyuk takes him down with a precise flying kick to the face. Lying on the ground, the first attacker groans as he's called a loudmouth customer. Soon, the second man is also lying on the ground, completely defeated. Sang-hyuk says he won't charge them for the coffee and tells them both to leave. With a serious look, he warns them that their hospitality ends here. Right after, the two are escorted out of the establishment without ceremony. Thus, Sang-hyuk apologizes to the customers for the noise. They then congratulate him for his quick reflexes, asking if he used to fight. With a nervous laugh, he denies it and asks them not to tell his wife. At that moment, the man's phone starts to vibrate. As he answers, he says goodbye and explains he has to go, asking everyone to feel at home. Hours later, the cafe is empty and completely messy. Alone in the place, the employee starts cleaning up the day's mess. Suddenly, someone runs into the shop, shouting his name. He quickly turns toward the door, surprised by the unexpected arrival. The boss's wife rushes in, desperately asking where he is. Calmly, he informs her that Sang-hyuk left some time ago. Worried, she wonders where her husband could be. Next, he asks her what's going on. She explains that the call got cut off and he hasn't contacted her since. At that exact moment, one of the earlier attackers kicks the door open with force. The guy storms in yelling, demanding to know where the boss is. Immediately, the woman asks who they are, now surrounded by a new group. The attacker tells her to stay out of it, threatening to show her who they're dealing with. However, one of his own companions scolds him for frightening a pregnant woman. Completely terrified, she silently watches the sudden scene unfold. Soon, the group's leader apologizes, saying he just wants compensation for his assaulted brother. Confused, she asks if the assault was committed by her husband. The man then offers to discuss the matter directly with her. In response, she asks them to return later, as she can't reach him. Even so, he gets annoyed, complaining about the lack of cooperation despite his politeness. Then he charges forward, saying that if the boss isn't there, she can settle things herself. The woman screams in fear as he tries to grab her violently. At the last second, the employee steps in and blocks the blow with his face. She immediately runs to help him, but he assures her he's fine. Angrily, the leader complains about the chaos and orders his men to handle the compensation. In response, the thugs start trashing the interior of the cafe. Meanwhile, the man bends down to pick up his glasses from the floor. Then the leader steps on them, calling him Four Eyes. Right after, he tells him to leave, saying he'll let him go to deal with the woman. However, he ignores him, even as the other demands he leave. Surprised, the leader wonders why he can't move the man. Irritated, he shouts that bastards like him always get punished. Suddenly, the guy panics from the strength of the grip he feels. His hand is then locked in place, making him question how strong the man is. With a swift movement, the employee twists his arm, and the thug yells, asking what he's doing. Then, the man screams in pain from the hold. Alarmed, the other thugs shout their leader's name. While holding his arm, the employee states that now he's the one who has to pay for the damages. He then asks Sang Hyuk's wife to stay in the kitchen for safety. The gang leader then yells at the others, asking why they're just standing there against a single man. With that, they all charge together to attack the challenger. Soon after, a powerful punch lands on the game boss's face. The impact sends him flying backward as the relentless attack continues. Faced with the scene, one of the thugs gets furious and yells that this is madness. But before he can react, he's caught off guard by the opponent's speed. He's then taken down with a precise punch that makes him stagger back in pain. Meanwhile, another enemy pulls out a knife, trying to figure out who this man is. Without hesitation, he lunges forward, yelling to attack the opponent. However, the former intern simply grabs a fork from one of the tables. With the utensil in hand, he blocks the knife and strikes the attacker's arm. Right after, he stares at the blade with a threatening and firm gaze. Even so, the others decide to attack him all at once. With a smile on his face, he easily defeats the entire group. Within moments, the attackers are lying on the ground, groaning in pain. Defeated, the leader still wonders who the hell that bastard is. As he tries to understand, he considers whether the guy really was just a cafe intern. Panting on the ground, he decides it's better to avoid him for now. However, his path is blocked by a knife stuck into the ground in front of him. With a threatening look, a voice asks where he thinks he's going. Desperate, he tries to ask for a moment to explain himself better. But John Do-gyeon is the former Balhei assassin, warns that the payback isn't over yet. Shortly after, Sang Hyuk's wife approaches and asks if he's okay. In the background, two men remain on the ground after the fight. In response, the agent assures her he's fine and insists the priority is finding Sang Hyuk, asking where he is. Sang Hyuk's wife replies that he went to distribute food near Seoul Station earlier that day. Upon understanding, the veteran asks her to report the incident, as he believes the cases aren't connected, and says he'll check with the homeless. Next, the scene shifts to the train station platform. Outside, the Seoul Station sign stands out against the urban landscape. Nearby, the narrative focuses on a village where unhoused people live. Angrily, a resident kicks a can while complaining about the attackers. Right after, he questions whether they're being exploited for labor. Sitting beside him, another man comments that they're treated like easy targets just for being in that situation. Then, the group's leader tries to calm them down, saying they should wait for the right moment to show how dangerous it is to mess with people who have nothing to lose. Even so, one of those present reveals he heard that an outsider got involved in the operation. In response, it's said that the boss told them not to worry about the intruder, and with a smile, he adds that he hopes nothing happened. Drunk, one of them assures everyone that everything's fine and there's nothing to worry about. Soon, another comments that disappearances of adults usually don't get deeply investigated. He also points out that, without security cameras in the alley, there's no evidence at all. While trying to light a cigarette, he ends up complaining that his lighter doesn't work. With some effort, someone finally manages to light the cigarette for him. Suddenly, the man is startled when he realizes Do-gyeon is standing right in front of him. Terrified, he backs away and asks who the stranger is, but the newcomer says he didn't mean to scare him. Next, the investigator shows a photo of a man on his phone and asks if they saw him distributing food earlier. Upon seeing the image, the man in the hat seems to recognize him, but his companion quickly silences him. However, the drunk grabs the phone and says the man looks like the guy involved in the incident. At that, Do-gyeon's gaze turns serious and focused. Quickly, the drunk's companion covers his mouth to stop him from talking further. Right after, he grabs his friend and insists that he's way too drunk. Then he tells him to stop saying nonsense and pulls him along, saying they're going for soup. However, the agent interrupts them with a firm order to wait. He insists they take a better look at the photo. Immediately after, one of the men tries to strike him with a club. Do-gyen gets irritated and demands to know what's going on. The attacker then decides that since he's already there, they might as well take care of the problem too. At that moment, a shout echoes through the alley, announcing that he's been found. Suddenly, Do-gyen finds himself surrounded by a large group of men. One of the goons quickly points to him and tells the leader that's the man he was talking about. The leader smiles and says he came to check out the ruckus in his territory. Kwak Kyun-cheol, the gang boss, looks him over and calls him a naive kid. After that, he mocks that the boy will soon find his friend. With a cruel smile, Kwak threatens that he'll join the other one after death, mocking his luck. Angrily, the agent mutters an insult at the group under his breath. Kwak responds that he never should have drawn so much attention. With a yell, the leader orders his men to capture him immediately. One of the goons rushes toward him, but right after, he takes a solid punch to the chin. In response, another charges in with a club in hand. Even so, the fighter quickly dodges the attack. As he fights off the enemies, he wonders if they really hurt or took down Sang Hyuk. Without hesitation, he ducks, and the opponent's ally strikes him directly in the face. With that, the attacker is stunned by the speed and precision of the move. The image of his injured friend flashes in his mind, raising new doubts. Fueled by rage, he continues taking on the group without pause. Even without being sure of the facts, he decides to deal with the attackers as quickly as possible. Upon seeing the scene, Kwak snaps his fingers and calls his men useless. Right after, he charges into the confrontation himself. Despite the rush, the fighter manages to dodge the punch with agility. Wasting no time, he counters with a precise kick to his rival's thigh. From the strength of the blow, the enemy steps back, wincing in pain. In retaliation, he throws a punch and mocks him, saying the hit was as weak as a mosquito's. Unfortunately, the protagonist's arm is grabbed, putting him on alert. Furious, Kwak shouts that street fights all come down to this. He then tries to take him down with a punch, claiming that strength always wins. His expression, however, twists in surprise mid-attack. The young man catches the punch with one hand, stating he doesn't have time to waste. Right after, he twists the opponent's wrist with a sharp movement. Creating distance, he focuses entirely on finding Sang Hyuk. Looking around, he notices shards of glass scattered on the floor. Surprised, Kwak curses him for his agility, comparing him to a rat. Without hesitation, the fighter picks up one of the glass shards from the ground. The rival then kicks up dirt in his direction to throw him off. Moments later, the dust hits his eyes, catching him off guard. Tired of the situation, the boss charges in with a direct, aggressive punch. With eyes gleaming, the determined fighter stands his ground. He counters with a precise kick that hits the enemy square in the chin. Hit. The criminal wonders how he managed to land the blow even without seeing. He then desperately tries to regain his balance. Opening his eyes, he sees the opponent holding the glass shard. From the impact, a cry of pain echoes as he staggers backward. Lying on the ground, he yells that his eyes hurt and calls the other a coward. In response, Do-gyen snaps back that a group who attacked a defenseless person has no right to complain. Right after, the attacker is grabbed by the hair, hearing that they don't even have the right to speak. Then the interrogator presses him, demanding to know where the previously mentioned man is. Around them, the henchmen hesitate, visibly shaken by how he's handling everything. With a threatening look, the agent asks if his friend is still alive. Desperate, the defeated leader breaks and screams that he'll tell everything he knows. He confesses that there's a group trafficking homeless people through deception and abduction. He explains they chose that target because no one cared when they disappeared. He then admits his gang cooperated in exchange for money, and that they had to abandon Sang Hyuk. The investigator asks if they even know whether he's alive and demands to know who these men are. With his face covered in wounds, Kwak says he doesn't know the exact identity of those involved. However, he remembers that one of them had a tattoo with the words "No Life" on his wrist. Upon hearing the description, the fighter's gaze grows even darker. Right after, the informant begs, saying they're just disorganized criminals who don't know what they're doing. While pleading for mercy, Do-gyen firmly removes the shard of glass stuck in the enemy's face. After that, he turns and leaves the group lying in the dark alley. The scene then shifts to a nighttime view of the city streets illuminated. Next, the man walks across a crosswalk with a serious and determined expression. As he walks, he reflects on the audacity of an organization kidnapping people in the middle of Seoul. He concludes that they must have powerful backing and that he can't operate like he used to. Thus, he arrives at a bookstore that serves as a front for an intelligence agency. Without hesitation, he opens the door to the establishment firmly. Soon after, he enters the quiet and well-lit place. With her back turned, a woman organizing books apologizes for the mess. She then turns around and informs him that the store is already closed for the day. The visitor states that the matter is urgent and requests to speak with the boss. In response, the employee says they're closing and that the boss doesn't respond to just anyone. With that, he uses the secret code, saying he's looking for the oldest book. Surprised, the woman wonders how anyone could know that restricted phrase. Suddenly, she lunges and tries to restrain him with a fast, precise move. As they exchange blows, the agent grumbles internally about having to work overtime. Soon, the librarian Hyunjin threatens him with a knife, demanding to know how he found out the code. However, the visitor easily disarmed her with a precise block. Wasting no time, she counters with a direct kick, but the move is blocked again. With his quick response, Hyunjin is shocked by his incredible speed. During the exchange, she realizes her opponent's movements are beyond normal. Taking advantage of an opening, the intruder knocks her off balance, ending the fight. With a smile on her lips, the woman admits she's surprised, since he's not a regular customer. Finally, the infiltrator ends the conversation and insists on knowing where the boss is. Even so, Hyunjin acknowledges Dugen's impressive skills, but underestimates him with a mocking laugh. Still, she notices it's an unfamiliar face and decides to find out more about who he is. Next, she explains that she can't control herself when a stranger uses the company's secret code. With that, she informs him that the boss isn't around at the moment. Because of that, she prepares to act before the one in charge returns. Suddenly, she lunges with a knife, inviting him to a conversation. Quickly, the infiltrator dodges the strike with a fluid motion. Annoyed by the evasive move, the woman demands that he stop backing away. Right after, the visitor accidentally steps on a mop. Then he picks it up and raises it as if it were an improvised weapon. With a sarcastic look, Hyunjin asks how he plans to fight with that. Without hesitation, the man uses the mop handle to deliver a swift blow. Even surprised, the opponent manages to block the attack with her knife at the last moment. She then realizes he plans to use the staff's reach to his advantage. Because of that, she decides to close the distance and try to throw him off with a quick maneuver. However, she's stunned by the opponent's unexpected and agile response. Next, she's struck by a solid hit delivered with the mop handle. From the impact, she stumbles back and admits she barely avoided the blow. Soon after, she decides to aim for his leg with the knife, but the man stops the strike with a precise punch to the hand holding the weapon. The spy stares at him, surprised by his incredible speed. Taking advantage of the opportunity, he grabs her wrist firmly. As soon as he immobilizes her from behind, she panics and begs him to wait. Ignoring her plea, the fighter forcefully throws her against the room's furniture. With that, the agent crashes painfully to the floor of the library. On the ground, she groans about her back pain among the scattered books. Suddenly, she notices him approaching and goes on alert again. The man then demands that she stop stalling and say where the boss is. He remains standing, imposing, staring at her intently. At that moment, a new female figure appears, asking if he's rich. Chien-goen shows up, accompanied by her guards, criticizing the mess in the store. She is introduced as the owner of EVS Bookstore, an underground information company. From the floor, the employee nervously tries to apologize to her boss. Then, Goen stops next to one of the fallen books. The book turns out to be a detailed file on Dugen's profile. With that, the leader asks if he's returned or if he's there to settle old scores. Even so, Dugen just stares at her silently, keeping a serious expression. Then he shoves a note that mentions a tattoo and human trafficking. Immediately, Chien-goen recalls the old Slave Island incident, and he asks if she knows anything about it. In response, she says that for now, she has no information. The man then asks what exactly she meant by "for now." She explains that since the case involves homeless people, the agency will also have to investigate. Curious, he asks if the investigation will take long. As she walks away, the woman advises him not to rush. Finally, she reveals that the incident involved labor exploitation, so the person he's looking for might still be alive. Chien-goen offers to help with the case but reminds him she'll collect old debts in return. Right after, she pulls a file from one of the nearby shelves. While analyzing the contents, she comments that his timing for arriving is rather suspicious. The document in her hands again shows the visitor's detailed profile. After that, she closes the book and says she has something to tell about the place where he used to work. She then asks him to wait a bit before she reveals the information. With that, she warns that nothing is more foolish than acting based on uncertain data. Sitting on the floor, the man replies that he understands the logic behind her words. Chien-goen reveals that the FES reconnaissance team has already arrived at the location and might find something soon. As she speaks, he just observes her in silence. Finally, the woman emphasizes that he knows better than anyone the skills of her team. Meanwhile, a lone van drives down a dark street under heavy rain. Elsewhere in the city, 3 suspicious men gather under the storm. Agent An Cheol-hui watches them, suspecting that it's the temporary holding site. Beside him, Cham Myong-sik comments that everything seems to be going a little too smoothly. His colleague reports that it was easy to follow the targets, who didn't seem very dangerous. Even so, he shows concern about who might be backing the group and decides to report it first. When On prepares to start the operation, something strange catches his attention. In an instant, his face twists in terror as he notices a new threat. An unexpected scene reveals one of his men being neutralized by a mysterious figure. Soon after, the attacker's red eye glows intensely in the darkness. The agent reacts in panic to the sight, not understanding what is happening around him. In the midst of the chaos, Cham Myong-sik realizes he's lost contact with the team leader. Before he can react, he too is struck and falls unconscious after the impact. Next, the camouflaged attacker takes down the entire team in the blink of an eye. In the center of the courtyard, On yells his colleague's name upon seeing the fallen comrades around him. Back to reality, he asks if he's okay, receiving a thank you for the rescue. Standing before them, the hooded figure with red eyes stares at them among the defeated opponents. With a blade in hand, the man asks where those rats came from. In response, On Cheolwi stares seriously and starts reaching for the knife hidden in his coat. He shouts back that they'd like to ask the same thing, and charges indecisively. Right after, he and Cham Myong-sik launch their attack on the hooded man. Even so, the attacker blocks both strikes simultaneously with his sharp blade. Soon after, he disarms them both with a powerful swing of his axe-like weapon. The hooded man then strikes Cham Myong-sik with a strong blow from his blade. Right after that, he takes him down precisely while On yells his partner's name. Consumed by rage, the remaining agent delivers a direct strike at the attacker. He then retreats, trying to gain distance from the enemy in front of him. Realizing this, he understands he's dealing with far more dangerous opponents than expected. Thus, he decides the best course is to retreat and report to the agency as quickly as possible. However, the hooded figure reaches him before he can flee and grabs him tightly. Defeated, On Cheolwi doesn't resist the final blow that immobilizes him completely. Soon his body remains motionless under the constant falling rain. The attacker watches him, murmuring that these pests are gathering, which he finds irritating. Back at the bookstore, one of the guard's phones starts vibrating unexpectedly. Quickly, the security guard steps over and whispers that there's a problem, catching her off guard. In shock, Shin Goen can't believe it and asks what total annihilation means. With that, the guard explains that he had to send another member due to not receiving any status reports. He then confirms the terrible news that all the agents sent were defeated, leaving Chien Goen serious. The scene then shifts to the West Seaport. Inside a car, a man's hands are shown tied up. Next to him, he and several others sit in silence. When he regains consciousness, the man wonders where he is and tries to recall what happened. His mind then flashes back to a few hours earlier near Seoul Station. There, Gu Sang Hyuk was walking while telling his wife on the phone that he was already heading home. She praises him for his volunteer work, making him happy to be recognized. As he walks down the stairs, they agree to have dinner together later. Suddenly, a strange noise startles him, and he turns around asking if someone is okay. Right after, he looks down, shocked by the scene before him. A group of masked men are holding someone down, complaining that they should have acted faster. Seeing that, Sang Hyuk yells angrily, demanding to know what they're doing. With the sudden attack, his phone falls to the ground while his wife asks what happened. Now lying injured, he hears her voice calling his name in desperation. Even wounded, he glares at the attackers before being taken down. The criminal then comments that he was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Next, a strong kick hits him and he loses consciousness. Back in the present, a car stops in a remote area. Nearby, a group of men waits in front of a dark warehouse. Soon, one of the captors orders the hostages to enter the building quickly. Inside, one of the prisoners is shoved roughly onto the concrete floor. He groans in pain, trying to recover from the impact. Suddenly, his eyes widen in absolute terror. He gasps at the horrifying scene in front of him. Beside two motionless bodies, a man screams in panic, not understanding what happened. Right after, a camouflaged figure holding an axe asks if he saw what occurred. The scene then shifts again to the FES library. There, someone politely apologizes for an unpleasant issue. Do-gyan then requests the FES information, saying he needs to check it himself. Seated across from him, Chien Goen watches silently and attentively. As she insists on her request, the woman agrees but says there's something that must be done first. Chien Goen then reveals that she has something important to say. The investigator listens to her silently, waiting for the revelation. With that, she mentions Balhei, the place where he used to live. As one of her bodyguards lights a cigarette, she warns that there are troubling situations going on there. Do-gyan immediately asks what exactly she means by that. She explains that Balhei agents have been found dead, and the company's operatives are acting to find the culprit. Chien Goen goes on to say that they're investigating the history of former employees and other organizations. Because of that, she concludes that he is also on the list of suspects. She then reminds him that there are still people in Balhei who hate him and asks what would happen if he suddenly disappeared. That was when Gu Sang-hyuk saved him, preventing a fatal fall. Do-gyun remembers the two of them crying and hugging in that difficult moment. Back in the present, he concludes that that friend is his only family. He then admits to Cheon-goen that many problems arose because of past decisions. Even so, he emphasizes that Sang-hyuk had no fault in any of it. She watches him closely as he speaks and adds that that's what he claimed. She also remarks that while problems are common for informants, this case is different. As she stands up, she warns that the situation could lead to conflict with Balhei and involves serious risks. At that moment, Seo-hyun approaches the two. Then Cheon-goen grabs her by the arm and tells Do-gyun to take her with him. Surprised, Seo-hyun asks what that's supposed to mean, while Cheon-goen explains that it's hard to offer more help. Outraged, she protests that her opinion should at least be heard. Even so, Cheon-goen insists he take her, assuring that she'll be of great help. The scene shifts to the city of Prague in the Czech Republic. There, a man answers his phone in a hotel room. While calmly cleaning his hands, he questions having to return to work so suddenly. Soon, a man lies unconscious on the floor after a fierce confrontation. On the other end of the line, his superior asks if something happened and says they need to begin an investigation. Then, the voice reveals they will investigate Jong Do-gyun, that man's former supervisor. He is Shim Gun-woo from Balhei's inspection battalion and Do-gyun's successor in the past. Surrounded by bodies, Shim Gun-woo agrees over the phone to return to the investigation. Right behind him, a survivor rises silently with a knife. The man curses him angrily, gritting his teeth before attacking. As he lunges, the investigator scolds him for being careless. With a swift movement, he counters with a direct strike to the neck. The blow lands solidly, and the man reacts in pain and surprise. The action ends with a fast and precise motion. He observes the result with a blood-stained face and a cold gaze. Suddenly, rushed footsteps are heard approaching the room. A backup team bursts in, shouting in shock at the scene. One of the men asks in surprise if the agent handled everything on his own. The team stares at the scene with him standing in the middle of the devastation. The group then approaches from behind, awaiting further orders. Soon, he reports over the phone that the mission is complete and requests cleanup. Back at the port, Seo-hyun reflects that she already had a feeling Do-gyun wasn't ordinary. The woman walks up, commenting that his past as a Balhei elite agent is incredible. She then curiously asks about the salary and benefits he used to receive. With a smile, she says she's just joking, while he remains silent. He then states they've arrived at the last reported location. Looking over the port, he notes that nothing seems unusual at first glance, but he warns they don't have time, and the priority is to lure the targets out. She agrees that they'll need bait to draw out whoever's hiding. She then offers to take care of everything from that point on. The man just watches her silently. Seo-hyun approaches the men to ask a question, and one of them asks what she needs. She then explains that she's just looking for someone. She positions herself in front of the workers. With a photo in hand, she asks if they've seen that person around. She insists that even if they haven't seen him, maybe they've heard something. One of them directly asks the other if he knows anything, but the men shake their heads. Soon he gets irritated, saying they don't know anything and that she should leave. The woman then asks to just make one more question. The man stares at her, confused by her persistence. Touching a fishing net, she asks if they've been using it. Outraged, the worker asks what she thinks she's doing. She comments that she heard nets need to be cleaned, but that one looks untouched. The man explains that the boat hasn't sailed in a long time, so the net hasn't been maintained. With a suspicious look, the investigator simply says she understands the situation. She steps away to observe the boat from a distance. However, she points out that for a boat that's been idle so long, the hull looks way too clean. She then asks if the bottom shouldn't be covered in barnacles. The man accuses her of looking for trouble and bothering busy people. With a laugh, Seo-hyun says she was just curious and apologizes if she offended him. Right after, she turns and walks back to the pier. The agent then asks Do-gyun if they can proceed now that the bait has been set. Her partner comments that she really does seem to have a plan. That same night, the scene shifts to a warehouse at the port. Suddenly, boxes are being moved. Next, men rush to clean up the mess, saying they need to get rid of the bodies before morning. Watching from above, Seo-hyun comments that she didn't expect them to take the bait, and her partner realizes she already anticipated it. She reveals that FES implants tracking devices in employees assigned to high-risk missions. Her ally asks about the tracker and why they didn't go straight to the location. She explains that they weren't sure who was behind the murders, so she caused a scene at the port on purpose. With that, the investigator charges in quickly. Her strike lands cleanly on one of the workers. Seo-hyun lands and explains she did it to make them panic and try to dispose of the body. The leader of the group recognizes her from the dock and yells, asking how she found the place. With a smile, she replies that they were idiots for falling into the trap. Do-gyun watches the scene and concludes she's as skilled as Cheon-goen had said. Furious, the man in charge orders his subordinates to attack. Immediately, an intense fight breaks out inside the warehouse. The fighter rushes in with a furious punch at one of the men. His movement causes the other to hit his own ally in the process. The agent then stares seriously at the fallen opponents. His partner watches the scene, surprised by his reaction. She realizes he handled everyone by himself in an instant, as if he knew exactly what she had planned. Then she wonders if he was just watching because he already knew everything and thinks it's better not to provoke him. The defeated leader begins to confess about a group called Daehopa. He reveals it's a gang that expanded into Seoul and traffics homeless people. Next, the man admits his own group profited from their operation. However, he explains that at some point they stopped buying people and only asked them to hold and transport them. The man adds that the payment was too high to refuse and that he heard the victims were taken to an island. The investigator concludes the situation is more serious than just kidnapping and that their next step is to find them. Do-gyeon demands the location of Daehopa, but the man stammers that there's no way to contact them. The fighter's expression hardens at the answer. The man then reveals they will come to pick up the victims at dawn and that it might be possible to catch them. Far away, the lights of a mysterious island glow in the night. Meanwhile, back at the port, water gently hits the boats. Soon after, men in suits with an intimidating presence guard the area. Next, people with their feet bound are forced to walk. A crowd of hooded prisoners is lined up and led forward. Soon, a large door opens, revealing a lit passage they are meant to follow. Inside a car, Seo-hyun says she thinks it's time. She then questions whether their team is plotting something, since they revealed the information so easily. Suddenly, the lights of a boat approach the pier in the darkness. She notices the movement and comments that they finally arrived. The boat docks at the pier as silhouettes watch from afar. Soon, the men from Daehopa walk along the dock to meet the workers. The local group's leader greets them, thanking them for coming. The Daehopa boss asks about the cargo, and the man nervously replies that preparations are ready. In a flashback, Seo-hyun hands a tracker to the one in charge of the shipment, telling him to place it on the ship. The man panics, shouting that he'll be punished if he's caught. He then argues that he cooperated and that the professors should handle this directly. The agent glares at him with contempt, asking if he really believes he has a choice. She then turns her phone screen toward him. The screen displays a photo of the man with his wife and daughter at an amusement park. Terrified, he asks what that is, and Seo-hyun warns that taking him out would be no problem at all. She threatens him with a family reunion, and the man agrees to obey. Meanwhile, at the dock, the men of the Daehopa organize the prisoners for boarding. The collaborator nervously wonders what to do, while a thug orders everyone to hurry up. He then glances at the parked cars, aware that he's being watched. From inside the vehicle, Seo-hyun stares at him with a stern look. Over the phone, she warns him to stop thinking and just do what he was told as she's watching. The worker agrees and decides that, for now, he needs to pretend he's cooperating. The Daehopa boss asks if those are all the prisoners, and the other man hurriedly confirms. Discreetly, the informant drops the tracker onto the deck of the boat. As he observes the prisoners, the Daehopa boss comments that there aren't as many as he expected. Soon after, he asks if the man dealt with the pursuers, and the other replies that they're no longer a threat. Annoyed, the boss asks why they haven't gotten rid of them yet, and the worker corrects himself, saying he took care of everything. The worker then lies, claiming he lost them out at sea, where no one will find them. The gang leader gives a nod to his subordinate. Finally, he looks at his watch and shouts that time's up, and it's time to leave. The other man says goodbye, asking for his payment as usual, but the Daehopa boss tells him to wait a moment. Confused, the man turns to the boss and asks what's going on. Suddenly, the crime boss strikes him directly in the neck. As the betrayed man staggers, the attacker says he should have done a better job. Then he pushes his body into the water, saying the fool was being followed. Moments later, his body hits the surface of the water, triggering a large explosion. Alarmed, Seo-hyun wonders aloud if they've been discovered. The Daehopa men subdue the remaining workers, who beg for their lives. One of the henchmen reports that everything is resolved, and the boss orders him to clean up the mess before coming back. The investigator asks if they shouldn't leave, but Do-gyeon argues that attacking now might slow things down. She stays silent, watching him with a serious expression. The agent explains that it's better to check the tracker first, since there's no guarantee they'll talk. Meanwhile, the Daehopa boat departs the port at high speed. The woman confirms on her phone that the tracker signal is working properly. The small device blinks discreetly on the deck of the departing boat. She follows the boat's path using the tracker on her phone. Do-gyeon concludes that the men they saw weren't part of the FES team and that they must assume there are other skilled individuals involved. His partner agrees, stating that her team wouldn't be defeated by them and that others must be watching. She then reports that she informed the company to investigate, while he remains silent. Suddenly, the investigator turns to him, saying she has a question. She comments that he seems to have a connection with the CEO and asks how the two met. He asks why she's so curious about the boss. She explains that it's a professional habit. Her life depends on information. She adds that the CEO has never shown that much favoritism to anyone before. In her thoughts, she concludes that there's definitely something going on. The agent then asks if, by any chance, they met when Dugen was in Balhei. A memory of a hotel corridor flashes in his mind. In that flashback, the door to room 007 bursts open. Inside the room, several men lie unconscious on the floor. Soon after, a hand gently touches his shoulder. The memory shows Chien Goen injured on the floor of the room. In front of her, Dugen just stood there, silently watching. Back in the present, Seo-hyun blinks and asks if their relationship was that kind. He replies that there's no need to reveal the past, they simply met while working. She complains that his answer was really dull. Dugen then asks how she met director Anjo, since they seem to trust each other a lot. The woman pauses briefly before answering his question. She then says that, just like him, she met her on the job. Suddenly, she's surprised to confirm that their destination really is an island. She quickly realizes the place truly exists, despite not being on any map. When they arrive, they find the kidnapper's boat anchored in a cove. As she moves forward, Seo-hyun steps on a rock and asks him to slow down a little. Even seeing that she's in a hurry, Dugen keeps cutting through the forest without responding. The agent asks if he's ignoring her and states that they need to assess the island's terrain first. Suddenly, the man's eyes widen as he sees something ahead. In that instant, he reacts quickly and blocks a knife that was aimed at Seo-hyun. He immediately realizes that a blade was near his neck. He then dodges it just in time. The fighter immobilizes a man with a knife while being attacked. Angrily, he demands to know what that guy is doing there. The intruder, Choi Seo-ko, former superior of Dugen, says he didn't expect to run into his famous junior. Despite the heavy rain, a man gets out of a car and approaches a building. As he walks, he wonders if that was the last place the ex-agent Dugen visited. The sign reveals it to be the Underworld Intelligence Agency, the FES bookstore. Because of that, the man enters the establishment. At the same time, a disc is hurled forcefully through the air. Right after, a shot hits the target and shatters it. Several others create small fragment explosions. Then the deputy director of the Balhei Art Museum, Koo Dawn, appears holding a shotgun. After that, he offers a man the documents containing information on the former agent. The deputy director assures that everything about the target is there, from missions to personal details. Additionally, he says the data goes up to the point when he retired after an incident. The investigator Shim Jun-woo stares at him with a serious expression. His gaze remains steady and unshaken. Soon, the subordinate questions his certainty that Dugen caused the tragedy involving the staff. With a slight smile, the man answers with a single word, FES. He reveals that the ex-agent visited the FES recently. For that reason, he finds it suspicious that someone already retired would return to that place. Right after, he lifts the shotgun in a swift motion. Then he asks if the other's interest in the case is because it involves his former superior. The other man stares back in silence, impassive. Then he states that he never mixes personal matters with work. The deputy director watches him with a suspicious look. At that moment, another disc is launched through the air. He immediately shoots it down, hitting the object mid-air. Though still suspicious, he decides to entrust the job to the agent. Meanwhile, Dugen is surprised by an elderly man. He quickly asks what the attacker is doing there. The man, Choi Seo-ko, his former boss, is surprised to find his popular ex-colleague in that place. Next, the veteran charges with a swift strike. With the force of the impact, both are thrown into the trees. The old man comments that he'd heard about snoopers and asks if he was one of them. Upon hearing the word "we," the ex-agent concludes that the attacker is on the same side as Dahopa. That way, he remembers Seo-hyun suspecting there were reinforcements supporting the enemies. The man then mocks him, asking if he came to enjoy the woman alone. Furious, the ally appears and demands to know what that old man just said. Right away, the agent asks her to step back, saying he'll face the enemy alone, leaving her confused about their relationship. The veteran laughs and asks if his opponent hasn't gotten rusty, then criticizes his teamwork. Immediately, he charges forward across the grass at high speed. The two then clash in a direct blade-on-blade confrontation. Next, the ex-agent counters with a strike. He yells from the effort of the move. Even so, the opponent mocks him, saying his moves are still as bad as before. Then he delivers a powerful attack in his direction. He rushes past, missing the strike. Right after, the other man feels the pressure. The attacker grins with a threatening aura. He then shouts that the reason for his rival's disadvantage is his haste. Wounded, he decides he needs to end the fight quickly, even if it costs him. After all, encountering more assassins like this would only delay Sang Hyuk's rescue. Watching from a distance, Seo-hyun is stunned by the opponent's remarkable skill. At that moment, she notices a scorpion tattoo on Choi Seo-ko's arm. Suddenly, the woman widens her eyes as she recognizes that mark. A memory from her research flashes in her mind. She recalls the enemy's file an S-rank assassin with the codename Scorpion. The report described him as a veteran active since the museum's founding. He was known for his incredible dagger skills, which earned him a perfect evaluation. The fight between the two continues with an intense exchange of blows. The agent remembers that his techniques were even incorporated into rookie training, concluding that her ally already knew everything. With determination, the fighter charges in with his blade. The opponent, however, manages to block the attack with ease. Taking advantage of the opening, the first man attempts another strike. Even so, the veteran just smiles with disdain. Then he manages to use his own knife to defend himself. The blade nearly hits the challenger's chest. Without getting time to react, the old man delivers a high kick. From the impact, the other is thrown back, losing his balance. Looking behind, he realizes he's cornered. Immediately, the aggressor catches up and grabs him firmly by the neck. With a smile, he then asks if the enemy knows something. The man glares at him with hatred, unable to answer. The elder yells that he will only become the strongest if he can endure. Right after, he raises the knife and challenges him to withstand the next blow. In a desperate move, the cornered man grabs his attacker's finger. The unexpected move takes him completely by surprise. With that, the younger man seizes the chance to escape the strike. The observer recalls some information about Scorpion's targets. Shocked, she realizes that the marks left on them seem to come from an internal reaction. She then screams in desperation for her ally to be careful. At that moment, the veteran's weapon activates with a glow. The fighter watches the scene with a focused gaze. He quickly manages to pull back before being hit by an explosive effect. The opponent then comments that, as expected, he didn't give up. He then mockingly invites him to fight again. He says he needs to justify his paycheck, but it's not worth eliminating a fellow agent. The target then identifies the weapon as a modified version of the wasp knife. He understands that the new version emits a gas that causes a strong reaction. Even so, he concludes that the amount of gas stored has its limits. The enemy advises him to think carefully, as life is the top priority. The fighter, however, stares back with a defiant look. Suddenly, he charges quickly toward the opponent. The aggressor blocks skillfully using his knife. Annoyed, he complains that the other is ignoring him, calling him someone with no social skills. Suddenly, the challenged man lunges forward holding an object in his hand. With it, he strikes the opponent's hand, causing him to writhe in pain from the impact. He then flashes a sinister smile. With his hand injured, the other man curses him furiously. With an intimidating look, the challenged man replies that his old opponent talks too much. Then, a scream of pain echoes through the dark forest. Furious, the wounded man shouts his adversary's name and vows to defeat him. Right after, he launches into a wild strike that is firmly blocked. The opponent, however, stares back with the same intensity, not stepping back an inch. Immediately, he counters with a powerful punch to his rival. With the force of the blow, the older man is thrown back into the trees. The fighter watches intently, focused on the next move. Meanwhile, the wounded man regrets having rushed into the fight. His right hand is now seriously injured, becoming useless for a while. In addition, he realizes that the gas from his special knife is nearly depleted. The veteran notices that the other is losing control, and that he himself won't last much longer. Because of that, he searches for a chance to land the final blow and taunts him, commenting on his apparent desperation. With a cunning look, he continues, hinting that the man might be looking for someone. He then asks if it's a relative who was taken along with the others. Upon hearing the provocation, the fighter halts his advance immediately. Seeing his reaction, the old man laughs and presses further, asking if it's really true. He keeps shouting in disbelief, asking if that was the real reason behind everything. Even so, he finds it strange, as he doesn't remember any living family connected to him. Then, the provoker recalls that everyone was taken out of the picture in the past. He follows up by saying that it was caused by a rebel within the company itself. Soon, the name of the one responsible, Song Ta-jun, surfaces in his mind. Watching the scene, the nearby agent becomes confused by what he means. Enraged, the other man grits his teeth and tells him to shut up immediately. Right after, he charges forward, confirming the provoker's suspicions. The injured man realizes that his rival lost his cool the moment he heard about his family. With that, he understands this is his one and only chance to strike back. He then readies the knife and shouts that it's time to say goodbye. The wasp knife is activated again, ready for the final blow. However, the attack is blocked firmly. The agent panics upon realizing the risk of a direct block against that weapon. With a tight grip, the fighter grabs the blade of the knife. Suddenly, the weapon reacts in the handle, catching the older man by surprise. The blast hits him squarely, leaving him completely stunned by the impact. He then screams as he sees his injured, trembling hand. The two glare at each other with hatred, one shocked, the other consumed by fury. Taking the opportunity, the younger man charges forward and lands a devastating punch. On the ground, the defeated man curses him in his mind. realizing the strategy behind the blow. He then understands that the opponent deliberately targeted and damaged the gas release on the knife. The precise hit had struck the weapon's small mechanism exactly. As a result, the block forced the backlash directly into the handle. The veteran feels pathetic, realizing the other only pretended to lose control to deceive him. Next, the victor demands to know the whereabouts of the kidnapped victims and the name of the one behind everything. Even defeated, the injured man laughs and says he'd be crazy to think he'd get that information out of him. However, he says he can reveal one thing, the name Song Ta-jun. He then reveals that everything is his doing and asks if he's surprised that the enemy presumed dead is still alive. Shocked, Du-gyen asks if he's really alive and what they were plotting together. Lying on the ground, the veteran laughs and says it's now up to him to uncover the whole truth. As he loses consciousness, he remarks how fascinating life is for bringing him face to face with an old enemy. Soon after, he wishes him good luck but doubts that this time he'll be able to save them. The survivor watches him in silence with a serious expression. Elsewhere, a car speeds down the road at high velocity. Two luxury vehicles follow each other through the dark night. Inside one of them, a man clenches his fists while reflecting on the recent events. Han Man-jae, director of the museum, concludes that it doesn't seem like something Du-gyen would have done. A woman beside him then shows a photo of Shim Jun-woo on her phone. She explains that he acts under the orders of Koo-daewon and questions the involvement of the supervision unit. Meanwhile, the cars continue in line down the deserted road. The director suspects that Daewon is plotting something and getting too involved. He suggests it might be due to resentment over Du-gyen having left Balhei in the past. He recalls that many important clients left with him, but she still considers the response excessive. Han Man-ji orders his men to keep an eye on Jun-woo, suspecting misuse of the troops for personal reasons. He quickly notices something strange, becoming surprised by the situation. Then several drones are launched toward the convoy. One of them attaches itself to the front of a moving vehicle. It immediately explodes in flames and destruction. Soon after, a group of masked figures lands silently on the road. One of them orders a check to see if the target survived the explosion. Suddenly, one of the masked men is caught off guard. He is then violently launched backward by the force of a car door. The scene erupts into chaos, with the attackers being swiftly neutralized. Han Man-ji then shouts, demanding to know who dares challenge him. The other masked figures watch the scene silently, without reacting. From inside the car, he roars in anger over the tricks used against him. Soon, Song Ta-jun appears and comments on the director's foul mouth. Surprised, Han Man-ji is immobilized from behind by the enemy. Next, he feels the pressure of a cord being pulled against his neck. Suddenly, a shot is fired at point-blank range. With a determined look, the director reacts. With a swift motion, he tries to hit his attacker. He then fires back at him. Even so, the opponent manages to get close and land a kick. He immediately pulls away, trying to create distance. Song Ta-jun comments that he didn't even get a scratch and praises Balhei's cars. With a smile, he begins removing his mask and says it's been a while since their last meeting. He then reveals himself and greets the director with sarcasm. The scene shifts to Du-gyen, who recalls the dying man's last words. Choi Seok-ho laughs and reaffirms that it's up to him to uncover everything. Song Ta-jun is behind it all, the same man who was presumed dead. In shock, the director asks how he's still alive, since Du-gyen was supposed to have eliminated him during the rebellion. Soon after, he asks if he's the one who orchestrated the attacks against Balhei. However, the masked man simply says there's no need to be curious about those details. With a sinister look, he warns that the director will soon be out of the way. Then he notices the woman and comments that it's no surprise the head of Balhei carries a weapon. Suddenly, the unknown woman charges with a knife, catching the enemy off guard for a moment. Even so, he blocks the attack with ease and comments that it was a close one. Right after, he grabs her by the hair, making her scream in panic. Meanwhile, Han Man-ji reacts with disdain, thinking he always knew she was useless. At that moment, the masked men of the aggressor charge toward them. The director stares at them and taunts his enemy for coming from so far just to face him. Mockingly, he asks if the opponent gathered a bunch of lackeys for himself. Immediately, one of the hooded men rushes in to attack the leader of Balhei. With a confident smile, he questions whether he could really be defeated by such sloppy men. Suddenly, a yellow van crashes into one of the thugs with force. The vehicle then speeds off, leaving the body on the road. Soon, a man approaches and apologizes to the director for being late. While Han Man-ji says he knew he would be nearby, the enemy identifies them as his elite team. Then the director's protocol escort, the Yaka, prepares for battle. One of the members orders his comrades to neutralize all enemies. Right after, he charges at the masked man, shouting that he'll defeat him without mercy. In response, the target throws a small knife in his direction. Another member of the Yaka, however, surprises him by preparing to attack with a massive hammer. With that, the warrior blocks the knife and calls the attack a cheap trick. The blades of the two combatants clash with impressive force. Then the enemy counterattacks with a quick spinning strike. Even so, the Yacha member blocks the blow with his arm. Soon after, he lands a powerful punch that knocks the aggressor back. The opponent admits he expected this, but says they're very difficult to deal with. Meanwhile, the Yacha team efficiently defeats the remaining masked enemies. Han Man-jae then comments that it's no wonder his escort is considered Balhei's strongest. One of the warriors mocks his opponent's swordsmanship, saying his team was handpicked. He then defeats the enemy with a quick and precise strike. With that, the masked man concludes that his side is at a great disadvantage in terms of strength. The Yacha leader then confronts him, asking what he's staring at. He immediately attacks and asks if the enemy is really in a position to be so relaxed. While fighting, the masked man realizes that facing that man, who seems to be the leader, feels like battling wild, raging beasts. Even so, he reflects that no matter how wild a predator may be, it's still not entirely impossible to hunt and defeat it. Elsewhere in the battle, a Yacha member is stunned by the sheer number of enemies. Even so, he keeps fighting, shouting that those bastards just keep coming. Suddenly, he notices something strange about the man he just defeated and grabs him, surprised. Immediately after, one of the masked men catches him off guard and strikes his chest. Even wounded, the aggressor grabs his opponent's leg with strength. With that, the Yacha fighter finds himself surrounded by enemies who resemble wild beasts. Then, the enemy leader smiles and says his assassins were trained to ignore pain. He immediately leaps toward another member of the escort. He then shouts that bringing down a Yacha will be easy for his men. The Yacha commander stares at him with a look of pure fury. However, the enemy deceives him and rushes toward his real target. The guard panics upon realizing he's lost sight of the opponent. He quickly sees that the man is behind the director and shouts that he's in danger. Furious, Han Man-jae pulls a gun and calls his enemy a pathetic worm. He then fires point blank at the masked man holding him. The impact of the shot throws the aggressor back, seriously shaken. Even so, the enemy advances and stabs him in the arm with a knife. Shocked, Han Man-jae wonders where he found men who keep going even when injured. The escort leader shouts the director's name in desperation. Meanwhile, the enemy taunts him, asking if he forgot his own words. With fury, the man charges and attacks the opponent with an axe. The adversary smiles and tells him to focus, asking what he's staring at. The commander curses him with a look of pure hatred. Then he takes a heady blow to the face. From the impact, he falls, visibly injured. The other Yacha members then rush to the director, asking if he's okay. While cursing the enemy, one of the men suggests their leader needs treatment first. From a distance, the masked man mocks him, asking what happened to his arrogance. He then watches them from the shadows with a sinister gaze. Since the situation had come to this, he decides to hold them off so the director can escape. Right after, he throws a smoke grenade and yells for his companions to take the chance and run. With that, the other members of Yacha rush to get the director to safety. Song Ta-jian just laughs mockingly and activates a small device in his hand. With a smile, he comments on the touching display of loyalty. Meanwhile, the Yacha man is surrounded and quickly subdued by the masked men. The other two escort members shout for Director Han to follow them to a safe place. Suddenly, a drone emerges from the smoke and begins to pursue them. With that, the two look up at the sky, worried about the new threat. Elsewhere, one of the enemy's allies reports that he has found Han Man-jae. He then says they are heading toward the houses behind the mountain and should keep moving. Suddenly, one of the Yacha notices something approaching. The head of his former ally is thrown near his face. Right after, Song Ta-jian confronts him, questioning how he can call himself Yacha if he's afraid of something so trivial. While one of his men screams in pain, the director watches everything with a serious expression. On the ground, the masked man praises the opponent for having made it so far with such a weak body. Finally, he states that it's time to put an end to everything for Han Man-jae. A scream of pain echoes through the dark forest. Mockingly, the attacker comments that the man made it far with such a weak body. Then he turns to his real target and says it's time to finish off Han Man-jae. Even injured, the director stares him down with a defiant and determined expression. With focused eyes, he prepares to respond to the imminent attack. Immediately, Han Man-jae charges furiously toward his opponent. The enemy only smiles, mocking him for trying so hard in that condition. In a surprising move, he strikes with a high kick while cursing his enemy. Right after, he grabs an axe and shouts that he would never fall without a fight. With that, Han Man-jae swings the weapon with all his strength. Even so, the opponent dodges the strike with a mocking smile. He then counterattacks with a powerful punch to the director's chest. From the impact, Han Man-jae screams in pain and is violently thrown backward. Completely defeated, he falls into the grass, unable to get up. Facing the attacker, he can only curse him with his last breath. Lying there, he asks what the masked man's goal is and whether it's revenge against Balhei. The man only watches him with a cold and silent gaze. Han Manji then shouts that gathering a few lackeys won't be enough, because Dugyan will find him. With a sinister smile, the attacker prepares to finish the confrontation. He then states that it doesn't matter if Dugyan finds out because he'll meet the same fate. Elsewhere, Dugyan is shocked to learn that Song Tajian is alive and questions the conspiracy. With his last strength, Choi Seoko laughs and says it's up to him to find out the truth. He then comments on how interesting life is for bringing him back together with his enemy that way. Soon after, he wishes him good luck but doubts Dugyan will be able to save them this time. Dugyan watches him in silence with a serious expression. He then concludes that if the former ally is alive, Balhei may be involved in the case. Several years ago, the Balhei Art Museum was the stage of a great conspiracy. A man with a knife smiles with a threatening expression. Next, he is shown immobilizing another with a sinister look. Balhei had gained a reputation for clean work and had expanded its operations in the industry. However, over time, some assassins began to act outside the company's control. As a result, an internal affairs department was created to keep the assassins in check. That department was given the authority to sanction any assassin who violated company rules. The punishment was immediate removal, and Dugyan and Song Tajian were the ones assigned to carry it out. The scene then shifts to a dark, deserted alley. The place is full of garbage bags and abandoned boxes. Suddenly, a boot steps into a puddle of water. Next, a man runs desperately through the alley. Angrily, he laments being located so quickly. Soon after, someone jumps from above and follows the same path. The man panics when he realizes he's already been found. With a smile, the executioner announces that orders from above are to remove him from the organization. Immediately, he charges in and strikes the target with a precise blow. Then he accuses the traitor of dealing with other brokers and leaking information about VIP clients. With that, the man tries to defend himself by attacking his pursuer. However, he ends up running away while holding a knife in his hand. Dugyan strikes the fugitive with a direct punch to the face. The traitor screams in pain from the forceful impact of the blow. Then he falls to the ground, completely defeated and powerless. His former colleague then scolds him for having the nerve to act against the company. Furiously, the man yells that no one there is clean enough to judge him. His hand is wounded as he grips the knife in one final act of defiance. His face twists into a mixture of hatred and despair. Moments later, the executioner ends the mission with a cold smile. The body remains sprawled on the ground, motionless. Standing before it, the agent laments that, though it's orders, this kind of work is never pleasant. He then comments to Dugyan that their colleagues are practically family to them. Dugyan, however, replies that this job can't be done if you let emotions interfere. He then makes a call to report the job is done and asks for cleanup at the site. Behind him, his partner watches the scene in complete silence. The scene shifts to a modern apartment building at night. Soon, the man types in the code to enter one of the apartments. As he opens the door, he peeks inside with a cautious expression. Immediately, he notices a pair of women's high heels on the floor. With that, he asks if she's already arrived. Yu Jong, the museum curator, confirms and asks if things went well. He then apologizes for being late, commenting that internal affairs work has been insane. As he sits down, he complains that his colleague has been getting more difficult lately. Noticing her demeanor, he asks if something's wrong. He insists that she doesn't look well, but she denies that it's anything work-related. Then she places a hand on his shoulder, saying she was worried something might have happened. Moments later, she whispers that she missed him and kisses him intensely. She then softly whispers his name, Tajian, in the middle of the intimate moment. Yu Jong gives in completely to the passion of the moment. The intimacy between them continues to build in the darkness of the room. He asks what's wrong, saying she seems a little off. With a serious expression, she reveals she has something to tell him. Upon hearing that, he says he knew something was going on with her. With a smile, he encourages her to say what it is. Suddenly, his expression shifts to a look of pure rage. His eye glows with anger as he shouts, asking what she just said. With a trembling voice, Yu Jong reveals that Internal Affairs is trying to kill her.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.